Hello, hello. Peter Mio in the chat as always. How's it going, comrade? Let me get my setup correct here. I'm a little bit off right now. Not mentally or physically off. My setup is off. All right, there we go. Boom. Boom, 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 boom. What else did I want to do? I don't know. Looks good to me. Just this. Show everyone my sick Pink Floyd shirt. Noah says, yo, Noah, how's it going? Torsten Pearson from Facebook. What's up, Torsten? How goes it? Thank you all for being here. Make sure to like the stream, subscribe, follow, like our Facebook page. Hey, Dark Side of the Moon, my favorite album. You bet. Great album. Hey, did you guys see the coup happening as we speak in Burkina Faso? No way. I did not see that actually at all. I haven't been on like Twitter or anything today. I don't know what exactly is going on in Burkina Faso, but I know that they ousted Blaise Compaoré, who was the guy who collaborated with the West to kill and coup Thomas Sankara. And then that guy ruled for a long time. And then recently-ish, like in a handful of years ago, they kicked that guy out. So yeah, I don't know what point they're at now. Obviously I'm not an expert on the internal politics, but interesting. Howdy, hello. How's it going? Owen Buell. Hey Ed. Hello, Owen. Justin Big Whip. What's up? What up? Thomas Sankara. I know. What a hero. Some people call Thomas Sankara the Che Guevara of Africa, but he was that. And while that's a good description and like it's an honor to be compared to Che, he was also his own unique thing. Especially because like Che went to the Congo at one point, right? I don't know if everyone knows this, but Che was kind of getting tired of being the industry minister, which was I can't remember. I don't know if that was his exact job title in Cuba, but he was basically the minister of industry, and he got bored and wanted to continue helping socialist revolution move along elsewhere. So he went to the Congo. And it was disorganized, and Che didn't understand the conditions as well as he understood the conditions in Cuba or his home country of Argentina. So it ended up being a failure, and he left after like a year or two. And then he went to Bolivia and did the same thing, and that's where the CIA ended up helping the U.S.-backed Bolivian dictator forces kill Che Guevara. Hello, Comrade Eddie. Hello, Jacob. Webster Lewin. What's up, comrade? Ukraine applied to join NATO today. They're trying to start World War III. I thought they were backing off. I thought they were backing off of NATO. I heard someone say that lawmakers split on NATO vote. Yeah, there's a lot of folks within the U.S. State Department who are split on this because they understand that it could lead to nuclear war. I saw what I had seen, and I guess this isn't a consensus in Washington, which I should have known that. I should have known that some, war-hungry, neoliberal, imperialist politicians would be pushing for Ukraine to join NATO still. But I saw some people were saying, like, if we do this, Putin might use nuclear weapons, which, doubtful. But still, you see, hold on. Let's maybe not push the entire world towards nuclear war just so this Western military alliance can continue expanding. Which, what a concept, right? And I don't know, I've been talking Sorry, I got kind of distracted there. Yeah, I've been talking quite a bit lately about the Balkans, and what the U.S. or what the role that the West played in dismantling Yugoslavia. And this is not to say that there weren't internal contradictions in former Yugoslavia. Okay, there were. This is not to say that they hadn't dealt with years of IMF and World Bank infiltration, tearing their socialist system apart and making it look more like capitalism. That did happen, but the NATO intervention in the 1990s and the U.S. funding of the Kosovo Liberation Army, this group that they had formerly listed as a terrorist, separatist, extremist group. The U.S.'s funding and arming of that group, and of course the late 90s carpet bombing of of Serbia, that destroyed their industry, hit the socialist headquarters, hit farmland, electricity facilities, things like this. This allowed NATO to expand eastward, and today there's more NATO troops in Kosovo than any other place on earth. So NATO has kept a huge presence there, dismantled and destabilized this entire region, which has allowed for fighting, horrible nationalistic fighting, and not civil war because they're balkanized into different countries now, but civil war in some cases all over, just so the U.S. and NATO can get closer to Russia. And now in 2014, then they destabilize Ukraine. Like, the fact that people can't understand the sheer aggression of this, like the fact that people look at this map and they're like, oh, well, Russia, Putin's still bad. Still Slava Ukraini. It's like, look what the U.S. has done. Think of how many people were killed in the infrastructure that was destroyed just in the Western carpet bombing of Yugoslavia, or former Yugoslavia, and the balkanization of this region. And occupying this place with NATO. Think about how much destruction and how much wasted U.S. money and how many wasted lives that is, from NATO and Western aggression. And just because it's a proxy war, because it's not a major war, because they don't act like it's a major war, even though it is an act of major warfare. People don't think of it that way. They think Russia invaded Ukraine, but the U.S. didn't invade Yugoslavia and Ukraine. It's like, yes, they did. They toppled their governments. They just did it covertly and lied about it. Whereas Russia, agree with them or disagree with them, they pretty much have stated their intentions fairly clearly and honestly. So wild that the lawmakers would still be pushing for this. NATO equals not so, literally. The right-wing dictatorships were the best thing that happened to Latin America. I have something to show you. This is called the Bloody Hand of Operation Condor. It's from an organization called Redfish. This isn't exact. Oh, here's the exact graphic I'm thinking of. Look at that. This is what right-wing dictatorships did to Latin America. Killed and tortured anybody with a left-wing ideology, to throw these countries into neoliberal trickle-down economic systems, which in the case of a colonized, imperialized country or continent like Latin America, means that not only are you giving away, a lot of the resources and control to the bourgeoisie of your own country, the comprador class, but you're allowing Western multinationals to pillage your country's resources and make sure that there's no labor organizations, or that there's no minimum wage, or that there's no social safety net, and things like this. And it has allowed Western multinationals to make an absolute killing off of Latin America. So no, that was not the best thing that happened to Latin America, objectively speaking, for anyone in the country except for the comprador classes of Latin America, and the imperialists and finance capitalists of the West. Ukraine is a basket case of corruption and austerity Europe will suffer to appease America. Yeah, Ukraine is pretty much, I mean, it's not a U.S. puppet state. The government is. The government is pretty much a puppet state. But yeah, then you have these far-right extremist militias running around, armed to the teeth by the U.S., or a lot of them who have been exterminated by Russia. A lot of the Azov battalion has been literally just wiped out at this point. And, all the communists have been getting arrested. All the journalists have been getting arrested. Opposition parties in Ukraine are now banned. It's just the most corrupt U.S. puppet state, internally devastated country you could think of. And it doesn't all have to do with U.S. interventionism, but a lot of it does. You should react to NATO's animated propaganda cleanup video. Hilarious. Can someone send it to me? I would love for someone to show me that. Is it the NATO and Ukraine complete the first joint nuclear waste? No, it's 2017. Yeah, I need someone to send it. What are your opinion on Max Blumenthal in the gray zone? Most of his coverage of the 2014 Ukraine coup and articles seem legit, but I always hear it's Russian propaganda. Max Blumenthal in the gray zone do a lot of great work. I wouldn't, there's nobody who I just say they're 100% right all the time. You can trust everything they say, obviously. But the gray zone is a really good independent source that does a lot of great journalism. I mean, you can be critical of their journalism and judge it for yourself on its merits. But a lot of it's really good. And when it comes to Ukraine, they're one of the best. They're really one of the best. Also, when it came to Syria, another major intervention, Max Blumenthal in the gray zone, and especially Aaron Mate, did a really good job with providing coverage outside of the mainstream Western media narrative. And the only reason they get called propagandists all the time and they get smeared is because they're telling the truth. Like, what did Plato say? Hated is the man who, tells the truth or whatever. A man who tells the truth is a man who is hated or whatever. When you speak power to the ruling class, when you expose imperialist lies, they own the means of communication. They own the media. They're going to smear you. And that's what they've done to the gray zone people. But Radioactive Comrade, love your streams, Eddie. Glad I could catch one live, but it's late here, enjoying some ginger tea and toking up before bed. Big chillin', you feel me? Nice. Yes, I'm glad you could catch the live, Radioactive Comrade. I do feel you. Happy to have you here. We'd love to see you guys interview Scott Ritter in the future. That would be freaking awesome. That would be awesome. Students should pay off their own student loan debt. Student loan debt shouldn't exist. Oh yeah, we got to talk about that at some point because I made the title of this stream, Biden promises to cancel student loan debt. They uploaded it on their Instagram, the NATO Instagram. Okay, we're going to watch that. And then Jacob, the video that you sent, we'll watch that one, the one about how the U.S. divided Korea. But I want to watch this NATO video for sure. All right, let's see this. NATO's Instagram. Is it this one that says this land grab is illegal and illegitimate? Just like everything Israel has done in Syria, seizing the Golan Heights. And seizing more and more Palestinian land. But, what does the U.S. know about grabbing and seizing land illegitimately? But let's give this a watch.
More regions of Ukraine as part of Russia. This is the largest attempted annexation of European territory by force since the Second World War. Another 15% of Ukraine's territory, an area roughly the size of Portugal, illegally seized by Russia at gunpoint. The sham referendums were engineered in Moscow and imposed on Ukraine in total violation of international law. This land grab.
They don't even try and substantiate their claims. They don't even try and substantiate how this land grab is illegitimate. You know, what evidence do we have that this was created in Moscow? Especially in a place like Crimea, where the polls coming out of Crimea the day of the referendum were overwhelming majority of people, you know, wanting to join Russia. And, you know, the majority of people in Crimea are ethnic Russians. So it makes perfect sense. You see here the caption, Donetsk is Ukraine, Lugansk is Ukraine, Kherson, all the places who had the recent referendums. And it's so disgusting to see NATO just say this, you know, demand it. Russia's illegally seizing this land. These places are all Ukraine. This vote for independence was manufactured. How do you know? Were you there? Did you oversee the voting? Or are you just sending a bunch of weapons and arms to Ukraine, to your preferred groups, and hoping for the best? You know, did you go monitor the election process? Of course not. You're too busy shooting artillery shells at the people of the Donbass. You're too busy shelling the homes of people in Donetsk and then getting mad at them and calling it an illegitimate land grab when they want their independence, or when they want to stop getting shelled by US armed Nazis, NATO armed Nazis. And if any journalist in the US had any kind of courage, like Ava K. Bartlett, who everybody should follow and everybody should support the journalism of, because we need more real courageous journalists like this, who are blackballed from mainstream media for telling the truth, who actually has been in the Donbass, who actually covered the referendum, who uploaded this 30-minute video asking the people of Donetsk and Lugansk whether they want a referendum and why they want a referendum, talking to, you know, an overwhelming majority of people who do, because they've had their homes constantly shelled by NATO-backed goons. And now you have NATO trying to tell them, you know, we're the good guy, or trying to act like we're the good guys. These places are all Ukraine, no matter what they say themselves. We support sovereignty so long as it's enforced only by us. It's disgusting. And it's even more disgusting if you look at the other journalism of Ava K. Bartlett, like this. Like all these videos of pure carnage in the Donbass region caused by Ukrainian neo-Nazi militias firing on civilians in civilian areas with U.S. weapons. You know, and U.S. media round the clock is talking about how Russia is attacking civilian areas and Putin is attacking civilian areas. Meanwhile, Ukraine is blowing people in half on a daily basis, and they have been since the U.S.-backed coup during Euromaidan.
President Putin.
And NATO's telling these places that they can't do anything about it. Disgusting war criminal pigs. Oh, man. I know that wasn't the video that y'all wanted me to watch there, but that one was worth watching too. Uploaded July 15th. So 7/15. I'll try and find that. It's going to be a ways back here.
What does it take to make a new balance?
We're going to have to scroll for a minute, but we'll find it. Is this it? Yeah, this must be it.
Russia continues to spread lots of false myths about NATO. So let us set the record straight. One myth is that NATO is aggressive towards Russia and is trying to encircle it. This is not true. NATO is a defensive alliance. Its purpose is to protect its allies. NATO does not seek confrontation and poses no threat to Russia. Every sovereign nation has the right to choose its own security arrangements. Russia has subscribed to this fundamental principle. We stay true to it and invite Russia to do the same. Another myth is that NATO promised Russia it would not expand after the Cold War. No such agreement was ever concluded. NATO's door has been open to new members since it was founded in 1949, and this has never changed. This open door policy is also enshrined in Article 10 of NATO's founding treaty. Decisions about membership are taken by consensus among all allies. No treaty signed by the United States, Europe, and Russia includes provisions regarding NATO membership. The myths need to be dismantled. The record needs to be set straight.
Wow. Wow. The record needs to be set straight. NATO is a defensive alliance. Anybody criticizing NATO is just a Russian propagandist. Forget the fact that NATO was formed as a defensive alliance against the Soviet Union, and it has continued expanding eastward ever since the Soviet Union fell. It's still defensive. You know, if we say it repeatedly, that makes it true. If we continually call it a defensive alliance, it is. Forget the eastward expansion towards Russia's borders. And also forget the absolute destruction that was wrought upon Serbia. As, you know, this is corporate Washington Post, who says NATO bombed Serbia into darkness because of the power plants, the electrical facilities that were being hit by the U.S., the farms, the roads, the industry, the infrastructure. Over 170 state-run factories, the headquarters of the head Socialist Party and the second Socialist Party, the second most popular Socialist Party, all carpet bombed by NATO. Is this what you call defense? Is this what you call defensive? When you carpet bomb another country and send a bunch of arms and weapons to the Kosovo Liberation Army and then occupy the Balkans with more NATO peacekeepers than any other place? You know, you can't just call your imperialist occupiers, your colonial administrators, peacemakers, and have it be true. You know, you can't just change the name. Those are still colonial occupiers. Just like you can't call NATO a defensive alliance and expect everyone to forget all the people you've killed, all the governments you've destroyed. The countries like Libya, who were once prosperous and had one of the highest living standards in all of Africa, who were brought to the state of having open-air slave markets and civil war and utter poverty. By who? NATO, the offensive imperialist Western alliance, NATO. And no matter how many stupid-ass cartoons they publish, and no matter how many online social media bots they pay for to do propaganda for them, they're still an offensive imperialist alliance, and anybody with an ounce of critical thinking can see right through it. Can see right through their BS, or anybody with an ounce of understanding history outside of the State Department narrative. Man, I should have expected such a bad video from, you know, the Instagram of NATO, but I was still like, whoa, this is so stupid. My mind is blown by the stupidity. You single, bro? No, I'm not. Sorry. Life is just a fantasy. You can live this fantasy life. Isn't that like the Fantasy Factory intro? Rob Dyrdek? I was watching a video about him the other day. I don't know why. I have no idea why. Oh, pain. I can feel a malignant tumor growing in my head as I watch that. Same. I think I have a NATO-sized tumor now. Right here in my brain. My frontal lobe. Hey, Were Pilgrim. Hey, Solgado. How are you guys doing? How are you comrades doing today? Did people see my... I guess I'll play this before we play this North Korea video, because it's relevant. I don't know if y'all know who Philip DeFranco is, but he's been a YouTuber forever. Like, I used to watch Philip DeFranco's vlogs when I was like a 5th grader. Or whenever my parents bought me my first iPod Touch. Dang it. I was not trying to play that. But now Phil does like political videos, and I've actually spoken with somebody who helps write Phil's political videos. And they're a nice person. They actually graduated from the same college as me. That's how I know them. But like, Phil has just been moving more and more towards imperialism, more and more towards just repeating the State Department narrative ever since he started with these news videos, which is really easy. Like, I hear people say all the time, if you work for corporate media, you don't even have to do journalism. All you have to do is read the press release that you get from the State Department or your higher ups or whoever else, and then Western journalists and corporate media look at an organization like Human Rights Watch with CIA members on its board, publishing stuff about how China bad, Iran bad, all the U.S. enemies bad, Russia bad. And then the corporate media journalists just republish that stuff. And they never have to do any actual investigative journalism, versus Ava K. Bartlett, who actually goes to the places that she writes about, who's actually been in the Donbass dodging Ukrainian shells and artillery fire, so she can actually write about what's going on there and not just make it up like the liars and the frauds that are the Western corporate media. So yeah, it just makes it really easy to be a bad journalist and to just keep repeating the State Department narrative and getting a pat on the back from liberals every time. So I think that's kind of what Philip DeFranco's fallen into. He just realizes it's a really easy way to make revenue. But we called him out pretty hard here, and it got 650,000 views. So we really got Philip with this one. We'll watch it here.
Explosions are reportedly responsible. And while it hasn't been confirmed who's behind it, there is a belief that it was Russia.
Russia invested billions in Nord Stream 1 and 2, then sailed undetected all the way to Poland, exactly where the U.S. Navy was testing underwater drones days prior, and blew up their own pipeline.
Explosions are reportedly responsible. And while it hasn't been confirmed who's behind it, there is a belief that it was Russia.
Like, what is he talking about? There's a belief it was Russia. No, there's not. The only people who believe it's Russia is maybe corporate media and some people within the State Department. But even they probably don't believe that. They just know that the U.S. has to say it was Russia, right? Even though all signs point to the fact that it was the U.S. And the only person with incentive to do this is the U.S. And the area was heavily monitored. And there's almost no chance Russia could have snuck in there. So it's just ridiculous, repeating of these State Department narratives just confidently as if they're objective fact. When in fact, anybody who has any kind of understanding about geopolitics knows that, there's almost no chance Russia blew up their own fucking pipeline. Like, how stupid do you really think we are, NATO and the propagandists coming up with this stuff? How stupid do you think me and my audience are? That you're going to be able to tell us Russia blew up their own pipeline from the U.S. to Germany when the U.S. has been having an aneurysm every day because Europe has been trading natural gas with Russia until the war started and the sanctions started and blah, blah, blah. And for those who don't know, Russia invested billions in Nord Stream 1 and 2, then sailed undetected all the way to Poland, exactly where the U.S. Navy was testing underwater drones days prior, and blew up. So that's Philip DeFranco. That is this guy who is basically transformed into State Department media on TikTok. And made himself out to be a clown here once again. So yeah, I'm glad that video got lots of views. Shout out to everyone for that. Thank you. Russia's playing 4D chess by bombing themselves. Absolutely. Oh, shoot. Jacob, I lost the video you sent me. Dang it. Where'd it go? I thought I had it. Oh, no, I still have it. There it is. Never mind. I'm stupid. Yanmi Park in the house. What up, Yanmi Park lies? Yanmi Park does, in fact, lie. Yanmi Park switched her story again the other day. Oh, what did she say? What did she switch it? It was she had to backpedal on her claim that in North Korea there's no word for the word love. Kim Jong-un has removed the word love from the North Korean vocabulary, is one of Yeonmi Park's claims. And she had to walk that back the other day because, like, even liberal scholars haven't taken North Korean defector testimony serious since the 2000s, or, you know, any scholar of any kind of serious merit, because they know it's, you know, ridiculous or being propped up by South Korean intelligence with the help of U.S. intelligence. I can't help but laugh whenever I see Yami Park talk about North Korea. It do be funny. It do be funny. It's just like when she's like, you know, the people of North Korea only eat rats, and then the rats eat the people, and then the people eat the rats again, and it's just a constant cycle of people rats. It's like, we know you guys have farms. You know, you can look on Google Satellite, or we can watch the movie My Brothers and Sisters in the North. We know there's farms in North Korea. You know, even if it was physically possible to live on a consistent diet of rats. But okay, Yeonmi.
This is the demilitarized zone in Korea. It's one of the most fortified borders in the world. It divides one country into two nations at war.
Tensions are high. Tensions mount on the Korean Peninsula.
This border is the result of the Korean War, which has divided one people with thousands of years of common history into two different identities, two different ideologies.
I want to pause there because I think that's one of the most important things to understand that I didn't understand for a long time, and I don't think a lot of Americans understand, that for years nobody could even imagine the division of the Korean Peninsula, right? It was just Korea. There was no North and South Korea. And even after the U.S. drew that dividing line and occupied the South, everybody thought something very similar was going to happen to what happened in Vietnam, you know, where the U.S.-backed government that was set up in South Vietnam was chased out as soon as the U.S. left. But in Korea, the U.S. basically just never left. And after they drew the dividing line, the North basically swept through the South and was going to liberate the entire peninsula, and, you know, unite Korea as one. And that's when the U.S. began their bombing campaign, you know, and that's when the U.S. sent troops to Korea. That's when the U.S. killed 20% of the North Korean population and set up this incredibly unpopular fascist dictatorship in the South, and kept the country divided, even though nobody thought it was going to last. Because the Korean people had been one people, one identity, one peninsula for years and years and years and years and years. And the U.S. just came in and occupied half the continent, and now have done everything they can to create an opposing rival culture and a rival society right on the Korean Peninsula. It's pretty wild.
Dozens of South Koreans are in North Korea this week, reuniting with family members they've been separated from since the Korean War.
But more than 70 years later, we shouldn't forget that the reason why this division became permanent, and the reason why the two countries still can't reconcile, lies in the interests and the fears of a country an ocean away. Korea has a long history of occupation. At the beginning of the 20th century, Korea was annexed by the Japanese Empire, whose goal was to dominate all of Asia. During the occupation, the national identity of the Korean people was almost wiped out. The Japanese pressured them to use Japanese names and criminalized the Korean language.
The former king of Korea lives on the bounty of his Japanese masters.
And I think that adds an extra layer of how gross it is that the U.S. has tried to westernize and impose their own culture and ideology on South Korea in opposition to the North, because this is a people who held on to their national identity despite brutal colonialism for years and unified together as a people, overthrew those colonizers, overthrew the people who had oppressed them and tried to subjugate them and destroy their identity. And then the U.S. just comes in, kills 20% of the North's population, occupies the South, divides the peninsula in half, has kept the North under the most stringent economic sanctions on Earth, other than those on Cuba, for the 70 years since, while they do everything that they possibly can to boost South Korea economically, politically, militarily, whatever else. So it's just a recolonization of half the peninsula, a re-seizing of their sovereignty by colonial capitalist powers.
Streets of Seoul illustrates how thoroughly the Japanese are assimilating Korea.
Sorry, not to pause it again, but I mean, I just want to say that's what the U.S. did in Vietnam and Korea and elsewhere. But, you know, Vietnam and Korea fight these long liberation struggles, these long struggles against colonies, or I mean, to free themselves from being colonies. And then this country that says to be the land of the free and democracy comes in and tries to recolonize them. And it got to the point where Ho Chi Minh, during the anti-colonial struggle, was reading the Declaration of Independence or the U.S. Constitution. And he was saying, look, it says, you know, you say you're a country who stands for freedom, who stands for sovereignty, you know, so you should come to our aid. You should come to our aid in this anti-colonial struggle to liberate ourselves and free ourselves and gain our sovereignty and bring a return of our national identity. And instead of helping them, the U.S. dropped, you know, Agent Orange and napalm on them and killed millions of people. Wrought absolutely like unimaginable suffering upon the people of Korea and the people of Vietnam. Rather than helping them and rather than being a real, you know, liberatory force in the world, like the land of the free should be, the U.S. tried to recolonize these places, killing anybody who got in their way. Thank you so much, Brody Andrew Mulligan, for the $20 super chat. Really appreciate that. Much love.
The Koreans lost control of their language, their culture, their land, and even their bodies. Thousands of Korean women were deported to Japan as sex slaves. And thousands of people died in protests for independence. Many Korean nationalists fled the country and founded the Korean government in exile in Shanghai, China, where they asked for help from the US President Wilson.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even know that. The DPRK asked for the U.S. for help too, just like Ho Chi Minh. Wow.
But although Wilson was famous for his ideas against colonialism, he ignored the Koreans' requests. Meanwhile, many Korean communists fought the Japanese in Manchuria. One of them, the young Kim Seung-ju, distinguished himself at their command. He would later be known as Kim Il-sung, which was his battle name. The Japanese occupation ended after World War II, although the Imperial Army had already been defeated in the Pacific. The United States bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. By using nuclear weapons, the United States preventively declared that they had the power and the will to stop the growing expansion of communism by any means necessary.
We are united in detesting communist slavery, no matter what the cost.
Meanwhile, the Red Army and the
It's a powerful image. We will fight against communist slavery no matter the cost. And then you see nuclear weapons in the background. Like, dang. They really will fight. You know, it's inverted. They're fighting to enslave the world versus the communists are fighting to liberate the world. But they really will kill as many people as they need to. That prediction proved correct, to stop the spread of communism and to stop people from liberating themselves from being enslaved by Western finance capitalists.
Korean resistance forced the Japanese to surrender in Korea. The American military later landed in the south of the peninsula.
After 40 years of Japanese domination, Korea makes a start on the road back to national independence.
The two winning superpowers made an agreement. They will make a temporary division of Korea and will leave after forming an independent and democratic Korean government. But we all know the actual end of the story. The North established a provisional government supervised by the Soviets. Kim Il-sung, from the Communist Party, became prime minister. Workers and farmers all over the country formed popular assemblies, which allowed them to participate in the preparation of economic and social reforms, such as redistribution of land, nationalization of industries, compulsory education, equality for women, and an 8-hour working day.
Северная Корея быстро пошла по пути экономического расцвета. Задымили трубы многочисленных новых заводов. Народная власть, проведя демократические реформы, уверенно повела народ Северной Кореи по пути мира и благоденствия.
The South Korean people went through a quite different situation. Syngman Rhee was chosen as the head of the provisional government. He was an anti-communist, backed by the US military and the CIA.
Literally just some guy from Harvard, I think he went into I think he went to Harvard at one point or later Yale. I don't know, graduated from one of these institutions that pushes out US State Department ghouls and people who work for Western NGOs, people like that. The U.S. took Syngman Rhee, trained him up in neoliberalism, and just put him in the South, after dividing the country up, and said, here's your president now. And this guy had no support on the ground. Nobody knew who he was. They knew he was just a Western-backed puppet. He was literally a fascist dictator who committed some of the worst massacres in Korean history. But hey, that's who the U.S. said was the president, so that's who the president is now. That's what you call freedom and democracy, baby.
Безработица, детская беспризорность стали бытовым явлением.
From industrial northern Korea, agitators infiltrated to spread communism. Ideas which only too easily took root among the 20 million inhabitants of southern Korea, most of them peasants.
The commander of the American troops, Hodge, told his soldiers that the Koreans were to be treated as defeated enemies, like the Japanese. Over 4 years of occupation, the American military has killed over 36,000 South Koreans.
Yeah, and that's often something that goes overlooked. Because, like I said, nobody wanted to support Syngman Rhee. Everybody just sided with the North and Kim Il-sung. They were going to liberate the entire peninsula. And that's when the U.S. really had to ramp up their bombing campaigns and things like that, including just mass massacres in the South. Huge massacres of anybody with communist or left-leaning sympathies who might help liberate the peninsula or fight against U.S. colonization. These are brutally rooted out, and some of the, as I said, some of the most brutal massacres in human history and Korean history specifically were committed by Syngman Rhee during this time.
Режим насилия и угнетения переполнил чашу народного терпения. В разных местах Южной Кореи стихийно вспыхивают вооруженные восстания.
Nationalist forces, regarded with favor by China's Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek and the American State Department, clash with Korean communist elements who look to Soviet Russia for approval.
And Syngman Rhee's so-called death squads got rid of politicians who were inconvenient to the Americans. Kim Koo, an old colleague of Syngman Rhee,
exactly what they did in Operation Condor in Latin America. And guess what? Where did we just find out about them having kill lists with left-wingers and journalists and opposition figures? Drum roll, please. Ukraine. Ukraine had kill lists, probably, with help from U.S. intelligence. And we'll probably learn that later down the line if I had to guess. But kill lists of left-wingers. Such as journalist Wyatt Reed, a mutual and a comrade of Midwestern Marx, who does great journalism, who was falsely labeled a Russian asset by Twitter and the Silicon Valley oligarchs. And he's now been put on a Ukrainian government kill list because, freedom and democracy and fighting back against Russian fascism is when you massacre and torture left-wingers who are on your government kill list. That's pretty much the definition of democracy.
was killed for being too soft with communists. Two opposing systems were emerging in Korea against the backdrop of the Cold War. President Truman saw South Korea as an essential outpost against communism. For months, the United States sabotaged North Korean and Soviet proposals for joint elections.
Советский представитель генерал Штиков напомнил содержание этого международного соглашения – создать единую демократическую независимую Корею. Но американская сторона устами своего представителя Ходжа вероломно уклонилась от принятого на себя международного обязательства.
In 1948, the United States held separate elections and proclaimed the Republic of Korea, making the division of the peninsula permanent.
The one-sided outcome in the vice presidential contest points to clear-cut support for Reid.
Рессельмановцы по указке американского командования провели в Южной Корее фальшивые выборы.
And you got NATO in the Instagram posts from the NATO Instagram account that we were covering earlier, talking about how Russia is doing an illegal seizure of land and, creating these illegal elections. When the U.S. just devised this voting plan at the UN to divide Korea in half, created kill lists to massacre anybody who stood against them, bombed and killed 20% of the North's population, and then just installed this dictator, Syngman Rhee, with a fake election, and seizes half the Korean peninsula, which they've occupied ever since, while keeping the North under the most stringent economic sanctions on earth. Yeah, we don't know anything about seizing land, though, do we?
Были применены испытанные американские выборные методы: насилие, террор, солдатский штык, доллары для предателей и тюрьма для патриотов.
The North responded with the proclamation of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Meanwhile, the Soviet troops left the country, following the initial agreement. At this point, the only option left for unification was war. And both sides were ready to retake the country by force.
And this is where people accuse the North of invading the South. And they say the U.S. came to the South's rescue when the evil, bad communist North invaded. It's like, what do you mean there wasn't even a South until the U.S. got there? Until the U.S. occupation started. And the U.S. started trying to seize Korea as a colony after they liberated themselves from Japan. It was a unified and united Korean people. So what do you mean the North invaded? It's their own country. It's their own country being occupied by Western fascists. They have every right to go through the South, or had every right to go through the South and liberate their own people.
В эти дни подготовка американцев к войне выразилась в том, что они усиленно слали из Вашингтона в Южную Корею многочисленные миссии. Сенаторы, дипломаты, генералы, разведчики прилетали в Южную Корею под самыми разнообразными предлогами.
Usually, we have this idea of two halves of the Korean people fighting against each other. But the reality is that after the Japanese colonization, communism was very popular all over Korea. The United States knew this and weren't sure if they would be able to maintain their influence on a united, democratic Korea, especially after the communists took power in China in 1949.
The People's Republic of China, the world's most populous country, was proclaimed a communist state.
According to North Koreans, the South was still in a colonial state. There were no reforms and the workers were repressed. The U.S. Army...
Thank you for bringing this up, Jacob. Jacob says, when people like Vaush have the audacity to say Korea would have been better off if the U.S.-backed South had won the war. And Vaush said that after admitting he knew that they were fascists, that the U.S. had installed fascist puppet leadership in South Korea. He's like, even though they were fascists, it'd still be better than the communists. It'd still be better than the socialists. I'm a socialist, though. Like, sure you are, buddy. You're a socialist who sides with NATO and NATO-backed fascists every single time. That's what socialism's all about, sitting behind your computer, cheering on NATO. Again, State Department idiot.
Army even recruited pro-Japanese collaborators to serve in the police force and the government.
Население Южной Кореи воочию убедилось, что американские империалисты оказались достойными преемниками японских монархов-фашистов. Неслыханный террор воцарился в Южной Корее.
Many South Koreans probably thought the same. Once the war began, very few citizens of Seoul fled the city to escape the northern occupation. Instead, they greeted the communists with joy.
Прохождение частей Народной армии через освобожденный Сеул сопровождалось всенародным ликованием.
So this is the North invading South Korea, where all the South Korean people said they were liberated and greeted the communists with joy because they had been getting killed and beaten by the US-backed fascists. So it wasn't the North invading the South, as the US said, and then proceeded to kill 20% of the North's population. They were liberating the South. And you have dipshits like Vaush calling himself a socialist, saying that he wishes the South would have won this, that the Southern-backed fascists would have just wiped out the North, you know, against the wills of not only the people of the North, but the people of the South as well. The people of the Korean Peninsula, who of course don't want to be ruled by US-backed fascists. That's why they fought a war against the Japanese monarchist fascists, as the documentary just said.
Народ восстанавливает свои демократические свободы, возрождает в жизни народные комитеты, наделяет землей безземельных крестьян.
In the United States, the Korean War is called the Forgotten War because it received very little media coverage. Even today, many people are totally unaware of the dynamics of this conflict.
Fuck you, Kim Jong, whoever the fuck you are.
The United States Army dropped more bombs on North Korea than in the whole war against Japan. And General MacArthur even considered using nuclear weapons again.
900 tons of bombs rained down on a 20-square-mile area. Before the bombardier signals, mission accomplished.
Американские агрессоры предприняли массовые варварские воздушные бомбардировки мирных корейских городов и селений, превращая больницы, школы и жилые дома в пепел и руины.
Forgot to unmute myself. Didn't America destroy 80% of the buildings in North Korea and killed 1 million people? Yeah. There were the U.S. bombers were complaining, saying that there were no longer any structures left to bomb. Every building in Pyongyang, the main city in North Korea, where, as this video explains, they had been industrializing and building up their infrastructure. Every building over 2 stories tall was leveled. There were American fighter pilots who started switching sides and joining the North and ended up staying and living in North Korea. In addition to fighter pilots complaining that they were running out of targets because everything was decimated. You know, and this is, I hate to hammer it home, but Vaush is such a fucking moron, dude. He is such a fat fucking moron. Sorry, not to be fat phobic, but this fucking loser. And not to go off and use a bunch of cuss words. I know I normally don't. But he is a greasy fucking loser sitting behind his computer cheering on the death and destruction of millions and their infrastructure that they built up themselves after they freed themselves from the colonizers. And this is the kind of shit that Vaush cheers on. The destruction of other countries wrought upon them by NATO and the West, which has very real, tangible implications for the millions of people living here and the millions of people who lost family members here. 1/5 of their country lost family members. And this greasy fucking idiot is sitting behind his computer on Twitch talking about how he wishes the South would have won. And I don't even know what to say about it anymore. If you don't see through these people and realize that these imperialist pseudo-socialist figures are as good as, or are either State Department assets, or even if they're not, are serving the same function as State Department assets, I don't even know what to tell you.
Soldiers carried out mass executions of civilians from both North.
Sorry. And Jacob is big Midwestern Marx comrade. He's been with us since the beginning, so he's reminding me of a bunch of stuff that happened in the debate with Vaush. But he dabbed on the millions of socialists who died. Yeah, we were talking about the Korean War and the millions of people who died and Vaush defending it. And he goes, damn. I mean, could there be... I mean, just imagine the visual. Look at this visual of the North being destroyed by U.S. bombs. Destruction and death being wrought upon this country by the U.S. imperialists. And then just picture Vaush's greasy ass dabbing. Oh, yeah, this is awesome. And it's a perfect visual.
and South, like in the Nogunri massacre, in which hundreds of South Korean refugees were slaughtered and thrown into mass graves.
It is at the front that the cost of freedom is being paid.
The North Korean army only managed to resist thanks to the essential help of China, which sent over 200,000 volunteers. This tragedy claimed the lives of nearly 3 million Korean civilians. The war left behind a devastated country, especially the north. Pyongyang was almost completely destroyed.
General MacArthur reports, the enemy has had his great chance. We are now in Korea in force, and we are here to stay.
A truce was signed in 1953 between a Korean man and an American. Korea returned to the starting point, with the communists in the north and the pro-Americans in the south.
Корейский народ никогда не забудет чудовищных злодеяний интервентов.
An actual peace treaty was never signed, and North Korea is still formally at war with both the United States and South Korea.
The South Korean and the US armies have been carrying out joint military drills as the tensions mount on the Korean peninsula.
The Americans never left, and they still have thousands of troops on the peninsula.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
Another great visual. Fire and fury like the world has never seen. We already brought that to North Korea, Don, and they still won. They still didn't give up their sovereignty. They still gave the middle finger to the U.S. imperialists and the imperialist Western socialists like Vush. I realized the other day that after all the anarchist online spaces went rancid with Azov stands, I don't have to be sheepish about my imperial situationist tendencies. Yeah, I mean, in the like, that's the thing. There are people who call themselves leftists who are like against the Iraq war because years later, 20 years removed from the Iraq war, we know it was a mistake, and we know that, you know, the lies about WMDs and all the lies used to justify the invasion. But are those same people anti-imperialists when something's actually going down in real time? Right? It's really easy to be an anti-imperialist in hindsight. It's really easy to say the NATO intervention in Libya was horrible now that we've seen the results. But there were a lot of leftists and socialists and Occupy Wall Street people at the time that was happening cheering it on. Like, oh, Gaddafi's evil, though. You know, go Hillary, go NATO. And they destroyed the country and brought slavery back. You know, socialism, communism, class struggle, and staunch anti-imperialism are the only way. You have to base your principles in that. Otherwise, you know, when times get tough, when the empire is telling you you really got to support this war this time, trust us, you're able to stand on your principles and say, no. I support the sovereignty of these people. I will not be tricked into thinking that the U.S. can bring these places human rights by bombing them and occupying them and allowing multinational corporations to siphon their resources. This has never brought human rights before. This has never brought sovereignty before. This has never brought democracy before. All it brings is death, destruction, poverty, and enrichment for Western multinationals and Western banks who run our political system and really run the world. Midwestern Marks, any guess on who blew up the pipelines? We talked about this a little bit, but it was the U.S. I mean, I don't have proof, but it was them or an ally of the U.S. Or an intelligence agency. You know, there are different competing branches and branches with slightly different ideologies within the State Department and different interests. So it could have been like U.S. intelligence, but it was the U.S. Nobody else has motivation to blow up Nord Stream pipelines because Europe, I mean, and I think it was the U.S. rather than, you know, any of their European allies helping them out because Europe wanted that option on the table at least, right? Like, they've been helping the U.S. enforce their sanctions somewhat, but, you know, if they run out of energy and all of a sudden European people can't heat their homes and they start rioting, you know, Europe wants the option to turn on those Nord Stream pipelines. Like, okay, we'll get some energy from Russia so you can heat your homes. Fine. But the U.S. doesn't want them to have that option. The U.S. would like that pipeline to not exist at all. So that's why I imagine they sabotaged it. And you say agreed. If not the U.S., someone that works closely with the U.S. Definitely. Had to be. Rules-based order. Yeah, absolutely. What a joke, right? The West. The West. All right, y'all. We made it an hour. Oh, shoot. No. We got to watch one more video. I was going to end it, but we got to watch one more. The Hill fired Katie Halper just now. I don't know if y'all know who Katie Halper is, but she does. I think she's a liberal, but she does amazing journalism. Talks to Matt Taibbi, talks to people like Aaron Mate, constantly gets attacked by corporate media propagandists, subservient bootlickers like TYT. So Katie Halper is pretty cool, but the Hill fired her and censored her. So we'll have to see this. Let's see what happened.
Some interesting news that sort of pertains directly to you and Sagar and Breaking Points, because you guys went through something that was almost exactly like this back in the day.
Some sort of.
Yeah, so
flavors.
So Katie Halper, who's a friend of ours and lefty commentator, does her own stuff all the time, does some great stuff. She was, I guess, semi-regularly filling in as a host over on Rising on the Hill.
Yeah.
Of course, the show Rising is birthed by the one and only Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty, and they were over at the Hill. And well, what happened?
You're wearing the Breaking Point shirt too.
You like that, huh? what happened was interesting to Katie. I'll throw it over to you now and let you explain everything that went on. Basically, she was censored in an egregious way on an egregious topic. But go ahead.
And people have been saying forever, like, how did Crystal Ball get on the Hill? Or how did Katie Halpert even get on the Hill? Or who was the other one who got released or fired? She was questioning the Xinjiang narrative. Kim Iverson, that's her name. People were wondering how these good journalists got on the Hill, because the Hill is corporate media. Now you see the Hill is cleaning out. The Hill is making sure that they have corporate imperialist propagandists only, especially now that Katie Halper had been talking to Aaron Mate a lot. And I think they even do a show together. And Aaron Mate is basically a Marxist-Leninist of the gray zone, always, positioned against empire and always being smeared by the corporate opportunist propagandists like TYT, who call him a Russian puppet or whatever. And therefore, call Katie Halper a Russian puppet by association, or a dictator supporter by association, which I imagine helped to get Katie Halper fired in this situation. So shout out to Chunk Ogre and the MSNBC of YouTube over there that they call the Young Turks.
Well, and I think it's worth saying for context that the Hill actually has a completely different owner now, Nexstar Media, than it had when Sagar and I were there. Right. So our experience and Katie's experience, we never had an issue where they just blanket told us you can't cover this topic. They were never so blatant. There was a lot of angst when we would, talking about private equity. I remember we would get pushed back. Pharma was another one. So there were definitely areas where after we would do the topic, they would express displeasure, but we were never blanket banned from covering a topic. Katie wrote a monologue while, when she was filling in about the fact that Rashida Tlaib had said at an event that you can't be a progressive and not acknowledge, I don't remember exact words, but it's basically acknowledge that Israel is an apartheid state. And so there was a huge blow up over these comments, and W. Wasserman Schultz came out, and Jerry Nadler came out, and all of this was a whole thing. So Katie, because...
Yeah, what a controversial comment. Even though the UN has come out and said Israel's an apartheid state. Like, what?
This is a really core issue for her. She is herself Jewish and cares deeply about Palestinian human rights and is extraordinarily well versed on the topic as well. She wrote her radar on the topic. She does her hosting gig. She delivers the monologue. She and I think Robbie go back and forth on it. Everything seems fine. And then they told her, we're not going to post it. And she said, well, she pushed them, tried to talk them into posting it. We really need to, be able to air this viewpoint on the channel. No, totally shut down. She asked if they could do a different segment and just talk about the topic and maybe even have, someone else on who could debate with her. She's fine with that. No. And not only that, but her future appearance that was already scheduled for her to come on the Hills Rising program was also rescinded and canceled.
So in other words, they censored her and then fired her because she criticized Israel.
Blacklisted her.
And by the way,
Yes.
that notion that Israel is an apartheid state is one that is backed up by the top human rights group in Israel.
Yes. Yes. And she cites that. I mean, so she has since, she actually published the monologue through another independent news outlet, Breakthrough News, that you can go check out. And I think she's going to put it up on her channel, Katie Halper, on YouTube as well. It's very well grounded. I mean, she talks about, Amnesty International. She talks about current and former Israeli politicians and what they said on the topic. She talks about the specific laws that, lead to this interpretation that, yes, this is in fact an apartheid state. She talks about the Israeli human rights organization that you're referring to. So this wasn't some baseless, crazy claim she made up. This was very well grounded in established organizations. And the Hill is basically saying, we can't have the view of Amnesty International on this channel.
Or the United Nations. What is the point of even having these international bodies? And that's how bad the media is right now, in this time of crisis. It reminds me of something that happened during the Gulf War where John Alpert got these tapes of the U.S. killing civilians in Iraq. And we had been told that this was a bloodless war, that there was no fighting going on in Iraq. And here the U.S. is massacring civilians in civilian areas. But John Alpert was fired from MSNBC for trying to publish these tapes at all. And then someone from CSNBC, I believe, tried to publish the tapes for him. They were fired. And corporate media systematically blackballed anybody who tried to expose what was going on. Exact same thing right now with what's going on in Ukraine. It's even extending into other issues, like what we see here with Israel. You're not even allowed to say Israel's an apartheid state, which is what the fucking UN says. Which is why I'm so glad, that we get hundreds of thousands of views talking about this stuff on TikTok. Because I imagine, every once in a while, someone from the U.S. State Department comes across one of my TikToks somehow, their nephew shows it to them or something. And they're like, oh, no, 100,000 people who hate NATO and think NATO is an offensive military alliance? Woo! We should censor him. So, yeah, I just want to cover that. Solidarity with Katie Halper. She does great work. The censorship campaign continues. We live in an imperialist oligarchy, folks. We do not live in a democracy. We need to unite with each other. We need to get organized in our communities and our workplaces and take this country for the workers. All right. You're on a list. Yeah, I probably am. Maybe I'll get on that Ukrainian government kill list eventually. All right, y'all. That's all for me tonight. Short stream. I'm going to go hang out with my girlfriend and enjoy my Friday night. I hope you all do the same. Whether you're with your significant other or not, enjoy the Friday, enjoy the weekend. Thank you for hanging out with me. Solidarity, everyone. A badge of honor about being on a kill list. Absolutely. Solidarity, everyone.